The morning light slowly touched the small town, and Emma stood by the bus stop with her hand holding a paper cup of coffee. Her eyes were tired but full of quiet strength. She wore her uniform neatly as always, her apron tied perfectly, her hair pulled back, and that soft smile on her face that fooled everyone around her. Because no one knew that behind that calm face there was pain, deep pain that made every step feel like walking on broken glass. Yet she refused to show it, she refused to stop working. Because she had no choice, Emma worked at a small coffee shop on the corner of Maple Street, a place where people came to laugh, talk, and start their days. She greeted every customer with warmth, even when her leg burned with pain. She had been working there for almost 2 years, and everyone loved her because she was kind, patient, and always ready to help. But behind the counter, when no one was looking, her smile would fade, her breathing would change, and she would lean on the counter for just a second to rest her injured ankle before straightening up again, pretending that everything was fine. It all started one rainy evening last week. The floor in the storage room had been wet after the delivery truck left. Emma carried 2 heavy boxes filled with coffee beans. She slipped. Her right foot twisted sharply, and she fell. Her ankle throbbed instantly. She wanted to scream, but bit her lip instead. She sat there for a few seconds, the pain spreading through her leg. Her hands shaking, but she stood up quickly, afraid someone might see her. She told herself it was nothing serious, just a small sprain. She could still move, so she kept going, wiping her face and pretending nothing had happened that night at home. She could barely walk. She sat on her bed with an ice pack. Her mother called from the next room, asking if everything was all right, and Emma said yes. Her voice steady, but her eyes full of tears. Her mother had been sick for months. The medicine was expensive, and the bills never stopped coming. Emma was the only one working, and she knew missing even one day could mean no groceries or no medicine. So she made a decision. She would hide her injury and keep working, no matter how much it hurt. Every morning she woke before dawn, wrapping her ankle tightly with an old bandage. She whispered to herself that she could do it, that she was strong. Then she put on her shoes and went to work. Every step was a test of her strength. Sometimes she felt dizzy, sometimes her leg trembled, but she smiled through it. No one noticed except maybe 1 or 2 coworkers who asked if she was tired. She always said she was fine, just a little sleepy. She didn't want sympathy, she wanted strength. She wanted to survive. The cafe was always busy. The smell of coffee filled the air. The sound of laughter mixed with the clinking of cups. And in the middle of it all was Emma, moving as fast as she could. Even though every move sent a wave of pain through her, she tried to hide the limp. She walked slower, pretending to check orders or clean the counter. She prayed no one would notice because if her boss found out, she feared he might replace her. She couldn't risk it. Her boss, Mr. Harris, was a serious man, strict but fair. He rarely came to this branch. He had several shops across town, so he trusted his staff to manage things. Emma had seen him only a few times, always dressed in a neat suit, always calm. She respected him deeply but also feared him. He was the kind of man who noticed everything, so she tried even harder to look perfect whenever he was around, though lately he hadn't visited, and she hoped he wouldn't anytime soon. The pain grew worse each day. Sometimes she could barely stand, but she refused to sit. She kept reminding herself why she was doing this. For her mother, for the bills, for survival. She remembered her mother's soft voice saying, "You're my strong girl," and those words pushed her forward. Through the long hours and the heavy trays and the endless stream of customers, she didn't realize how pale she looked, how her hands trembled slightly, how her co-workers whispered quietly, wondering what was wrong. Then one afternoon, while she was taking an order from an impatient customer, her vision blurred for a moment. She felt her knee buckle slightly. She steadied herself on the counter and forced a smile. But in that brief second, a man sitting in the corner noticed, his sharp eyes following her every move. He watched as she tried to hide her limp, as she pressed her hand against the counter for balance when she thought no one was watching. That man wasn't just another customer, he was Mr. Harris, who had decided to visit the cafe unexpectedly. After receiving a complaint from another branch, Emma didn't see him at first. She was too focused on her work, on hiding her pain, on staying strong. But his eyes never left her. He noticed the way she winced when she walked, the way she leaned slightly to one side, the small moments when she closed her eyes as if taking a breath before moving again. Something inside him changed as he watched her, a mix of curiosity, concern, and something unspoken. He didn't say a word that day, but he stayed longer than usual, silently observing as the sun began to set and the cafe started to close. Emma finally sat down in the back room alone. She untied her shoe and gasped softly. Her ankle was swollen and red. She bit her lip to stop from crying, whispering to herself, "Just one more day. I can make it." She didn't know that her secret was no longer a secret, and that the person who had seen everything was about to change her life forever. The next morning came quietly, the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows as Emma walked toward the cafe, her steps slow and careful, her ankle still throbbing under the tight bandage she had wrapped before leaving home. She carried her bag close to her chest and whispered small prayers under her breath, asking for strength to get through another long day. Her mother had smiled weakly before she left, telling her to stay safe, and that smile gave Emma the courage to move forward even when every step felt heavy. Inside the cafe, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air, warm and rich, and for a moment Emma forgot her pain, greeting her coworkers with that same soft smile everyone loved. She tied her apron and began setting up the counter, checking supplies, wiping tables, and making sure everything looked perfect. The morning rush would begin soon, and she wanted everything to be ready. The customers trusted her energy, her care, her kindness, and she didn't want anyone to see how tired she really was inside. She didn't know that someone else was thinking about her too. Mr. Harris sat in his car outside the cafe, the rain sliding down the windshield as he looked through the glass at the small shop. His mind still replaying what he saw yesterday, the way Emma tried to hide her pain, the way she smiled through it as if she was afraid to show weakness. Something about it bothered him deeply. He had seen employees come and go over the years, some lazy, some careless, but Emma was different. There was something strong yet fragile about her, something that pulled at his thoughts even after he left. He stepped out of his car and entered the cafe quietly, wearing a dark coat that made him blend in with the early morning crowd. Emma was behind the counter, her back turned as she prepared drinks. She didn't see him come in. He chose a seat near the corner again, the same spot where he had watched her the day before. His eyes followed her every move. She was trying to hide her limp again, moving carefully, pretending to be quick and confident, but he could see the tiny signs of pain in her face, the small frown that appeared before she forced a smile again. The cafe soon filled with noise, cups clinking, customers laughing, the smell of pastries filling the room, and in the middle of all that, Emma kept going, her mind focused on each order, each smile, each polite thank you. She didn't notice that Mr. Harris's eyes never left her, watching her every move with growing concern. He noticed how she paused between tasks, pressing her hand on the counter for support, and how she winced slightly when she thought no one was looking. It was clear now that this wasn't just a small ache, this was real pain. He wanted to stand up, to tell her to sit down, to ask what was wrong, but something held him back. He didn't want to embarrass her in front of everyone. He knew how proud she was. He could see it in the way she carried herself, even when she was hurting. So he stayed silent, watching and waiting, wondering how long she could keep pretending, wondering what had forced her to keep going like this as the hours passed. Emma's ankle grew worse, the swelling pressing against the bandage. Her steps became slower, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She told herself over and over that she had to finish the shift, that her mother was depending on her, and she would not let her down, even if it meant hurting herself more. Her coworkers noticed her pale face and asked if she was feeling unwell. She laughed softly and said she was fine, just a little tired, and then she moved away quickly so they wouldn't ask more. Mr. Harris kept watching, his mind racing with questions. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she keep working like this, and why did he feel so protective of her? He had seen hard-working employees before, but something about Emma's quiet strength touched him in a way he couldn't explain. Maybe it was her loyalty, maybe it was her fear, or maybe it was the way she hid her pain behind kindness. Whatever it was, he knew he couldn't just walk away this time when the rush slowed. Emma finally found a moment to rest. She leaned against the counter, her eyes half closed for a second, her breathing slow and shaky. Mr. Harris noticed how she tried to stretch her leg carefully, hiding the pain again when a customer approached. He watched her push through every second as if her entire life depended on this job, and in a way it did. Though he didn't know why yet, he ordered a coffee, and when she came to serve him, she froze for a brief moment, recognizing his face. Her heart started racing. She quickly smiled, trying to hide the fear that rose inside her. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. He nodded, pretending to be calm, but his mind was full of thoughts. He could see the pain in her eyes now, clearer than ever before after he left. Emma leaned against the wall in the back room, her ankles screaming with pain. She whispered quietly, "Just a few more hours," trying to convince herself she could make it through the day. She didn't know that Mr. Harris had not gone far. He stood outside near the cafe door, looking through the window one last time, and the expression on his face was not one of anger or frustration. It was one of worry, and something deeper that night after closing time. When Emma finally limped out of the cafe, tired and aching, she didn't notice the car parked a few meters away, with Mr. Harris still sitting inside, watching as she slowly made her way down the street, holding her bag tightly and walking into the fading light. His hand rested on the steering wheel as he whispered to himself softly, "Tomorrow I'll talk to her." And with that quiet promise, he started the engine, unaware that his decision would change both their lives in ways they never expected. The next day began with a heavy gray sky hanging over the city, clouds thick and low as if they carried the weight of hidden secrets. Emma woke up early as always, her ankle stiff and sore. The bandage felt tighter than before. She sat on the edge of her bed staring at the small window that showed the quiet street outside. Her mother was still sleeping peacefully, and for a moment Emma allowed herself to smile softly. Then she whispered to herself that she had to stay strong. She had to keep going no matter what, because giving up was not an option. She arrived at the cafe before anyone else. Unlocking the door and stepping inside, the smell of coffee beans wrapped around her like comfort. She moved slowly, cleaning the tables, setting out the cups, checking the stock. Her limp more visible now, but she tried to hide it behind busy movements, pretending to rush, pretending to be fine. Each step a battle between pain and pride. She didn't know that Mr. Harris was already watching from across the street, sitting inside his car again, his eyes following her through the glass. He had spent the night thinking about her, wondering why she worked like that, why she never said a word about the pain, and why he couldn't stop thinking about her courage. He told himself it was just concern for a hardworking employee, but deep down he knew it was more than that. Something about Emma reminded him of a time long ago when he had to struggle too, when he had seen his own mother work through pain just to feed him, and that memory made his heart heavy. When the cafe opened, customers began to fill the room again, laughter and chatter echoing around. Emma smiled and moved between the tables with quiet grace, though her steps were slower today. Her coworkers noticed it but didn't say anything, afraid to upset her. She was always so kind to everyone that no one wanted to make her feel weak, yet everyone could see something was wrong, except the customers who only saw her gentle smile and warm eyes. Never guessing the storm she was hiding behind that smile, Mr. Harris walked in quietly again, this time without his coat, dressed casually so no one would notice him as the boss. He took a seat in the corner like before, ordered a drink, and began watching her closely. Each small movement, each tiny wince, each moment of silence when she thought no one was looking. He could see how much she was struggling now. Her hand gripping the counter for balance, her face pale but still determined. It amazed him and broke his heart at the same time as he sat there. He began to notice more than just her pain. He saw how she spoke to every customer kindly, how she gave free cookies to the children who came in with their parents, how she helped an old man find his wallet when he dropped it, and how she cheered up a crying coworker with a quiet joke. She gave so much to everyone around her even when she had nothing left to give, and that made him realize how rare her spirit was, how strong she really was beneath all that exhaustion. When her break finally came, Emma walked to the back room, limping more heavily now. She sat on a small stool and untied her shoe carefully. The skin around her ankle was swollen and red. She winced as she touched it, whispering softly to herself that it would be fine soon, that she just needed to get through the week. She didn't know that Mr. Harris had followed her quietly to the doorway, standing just out of sight, his heart sinking at what he saw. Her pain was worse than he imagined, and he knew she wouldn't last much longer if she kept going like this. He stepped back quietly and returned to his seat. Deep in thought, he realized he couldn't confront her in front of everyone. She was proud she would deny it, and he didn't want to embarrass her. He needed to find another way, something that would help her without making her feel ashamed, as he thought. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant reminding him about a meeting, but he ignored it, his eyes still fixed on the door where Emma had gone. Something in him told him that this was more important than any meeting today. Emma came back out a few minutes later, her limp even more visible now, but she forced a smile again as if nothing had happened. Mr. Harris couldn't take his eyes off her. He saw the determination in her every step, and he made a decision right then. He would help her, even if she didn't ask for it, even if she refused at first because he couldn't stand by and watch her destroy herself, just to keep a job that she clearly valued more than her own health. When the shift ended that evening, the rain had started again, soft and cold. Emma locked the cafe doors and leaned against them for a second, exhausted. She looked down the street, holding her small umbrella, and started walking home slowly, unaware that Mr. Harris was following her at a distance, his car moving quietly behind her, watching as she limped across the wet sidewalk, her figure small under the umbrella, his heart heavy with guilt and admiration mixed together. He stopped when she reached her building, watching as she climbed the stairs slowly, holding the railing for support, and when the door finally closed behind her, he sat there in silence for a long time, thinking about what he had seen, thinking about how much pain she had hidden from everyone, and thinking about what he needed to do next. He pulled out his phone, typing a short message to his assistant that read, "Find Emma's file and schedule a private meeting with her tomorrow morning at 8. And with that decision, he started the car, his eyes filled with quiet determination, knowing that the next day would change everything for her, and maybe for him too. The morning came quietly, with soft light slipping through the window and touching the edge of Emma's small kitchen. The smell of tea filled the air as she moved slowly, trying not to wake her mother, who was still asleep in the next room. Her ankle ached worse than before, the swelling now making it hard to put on her shoe, but she didn't let herself cry. She just bit her lip and whispered that she could make it through another day. She had to, because quitting wasn't something she could even think about. She tied her hair, grabbed her bag, and walked out into the cool morning air. The streets were still half asleep, a few cars passing by, a few people heading to work. She limped toward the bus stop as quietly as possible, hiding her pain behind the calm expression she had practiced so many times before. No one knew that every step she took sent a sharp sting through her body, yet she forced a small smile because she didn't want anyone's pity. She only wanted peace at the same time. Mr. Harris sat in his office, staring at the file on his desk, Emma's name written neatly across the top. He had spent the entire night thinking about her, about what he saw, about the quiet strength in her eyes, and the secret pain she carried without complaint. He had read her record again, every line showing dedication, never late, never absent, never complaining. It made him wonder how many days she had pushed through the pain before he noticed. He leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply, knowing that today he couldn't stay silent anymore. When Emma arrived at the cafe, her co-workers greeted her as always. She smiled back, trying to act normal. But her heart skipped a beat when the manager told her that Mr. Harris wanted to see her in his office at 8 sharp. Her hands froze for a moment, her stomach twisting with fear. She nodded quietly and pretended to be calm. But inside her thoughts raced. She wondered if he had found out about her injury. Maybe someone told him. Maybe he thought she was lazy. Maybe she was about to lose everything. The clock ticked faster than usual, every minute pulling her closer to the meeting. She could barely focus on her work, her hands trembling slightly as she served coffee and wiped tables. She tried to breathe slowly, telling herself it might not be bad, but her heart refused to listen. When the time finally came, she took off her apron, smoothed her hair, and began the slow walk toward his office, each step echoing in her ears like a drum, the pain in her leg almost forgotten under the weight of her fear. She knocked softly on the door and a calm voice said, "Come in." She entered the room, her eyes lowered, and saw Mr. Harris sitting behind his desk, his expression serious but not cold. She stood in front of him quietly, her hands clasped together, waiting for him to speak. The silence stretched long and heavy until he finally said, "Emma, please sit down," his voice gentle but firm. She hesitated for a second, then sat slowly, her heart pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. He looked at her carefully, noticing how pale she was, how tired her eyes looked. And then he said softly, "I know about your injury." The words hung in the air like thunder. Emma froze, her breath caught in her throat. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She shook her head quickly and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just didn't want to lose my job." Her voice cracked as she spoke, her hands trembling in her lap. Mr. Harris leaned forward slightly, his eyes kind now. "Emma, why didn't you tell me? You could have been seriously hurt. You shouldn't have been working in that condition." She wiped her eyes and said softly, "I couldn't, sir. My mother is sick. The hospital bills keep coming. I can't afford to miss even one day. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak, I just needed to keep going. Her voice broke again as she looked down at her injured ankle wrapped under her uniform. The room felt silent for a long moment, only the sound of the clock ticking softly in the background. Mr. Harris took a deep breath and stood up, walking around the desk. He stopped beside her chair and said quietly, "Emma, you're not in trouble, but you can't go on like this. You've been hurting yourself trying to hold everything together, and that's not strength, that's suffering. And you don't have to do it alone anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion, unsure what he meant. He reached into his pocket and took out his car keys, then said something that made her heart stop. "Come with me." She blinked, confused. "Sir, I don't understand." "Where are we going?" He smiled faintly. "Just trust me." His tone was calm but firm, the kind of voice that made people listen. She hesitated for a second, then nodded slowly, standing up and following him out of the office, her limp more visible now that she didn't bother hiding it anymore. They walked outside together, the sun just starting to shine through the clouds. She looked around nervously as they reached his car. "Sir, really, it's fine. I can work. I don't need—" But he interrupted gently. "Emma, no arguments. You've done enough. Now let someone help you for a change." She opened her mouth to speak but stopped. Something in his voice made her believe him. Maybe for the first time she felt safe enough to let go just a little. As the car drove away from the cafe, Emma sat quietly, her heart still racing but her mind full of questions. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what he planned. She only knew that this man who had once seemed so distant now looked at her with genuine care, and though fear still lingered inside her, a small spark of hope began to grow too, a hope that maybe this day would not end the way she feared, but the way she truly needed. The car moved through the quiet streets, the morning sun peeking softly through the clouds as Emma sat in the passenger seat holding her bag tightly against her chest, her heart beating fast with confusion and fear. She looked out the window at the passing buildings, wondering where her boss was taking her. She wanted to ask, but her throat felt dry, her thoughts running in circles. She kept thinking of her mother, of the cafe, of everything she might lose if this went wrong. She didn't know that this ride would change her life in ways she could never imagine. Mr. Harris glanced at her from time to time, his face calm but his mind full of thoughts. He could see the nervousness in her eyes, the way she tried to sit still though her hands trembled slightly. He understood that she was scared. She had worked so hard just to survive, and now he was taking her into something she couldn't predict. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but he decided to wait, to show her instead of telling her, because words were not enough this time. The car stopped in front of a clean white building with large glass doors. The letters above them read Riverside Medical Center. Emma looked at the sign and froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned toward him quickly, her eyes wide with worry. "Sir, I can't afford this place," she said softly. But he shook his head gently and said, "You don't have to. I brought you here to take care of that injury. You've done enough hiding. It's time to heal." She shook her head again, tears filling her eyes. "Please, sir, I don't want to be a burden." Her voice broke as she spoke. But he smiled kindly and said, "Emma, you've been carrying too much alone. Let someone else carry something for once." He stepped out of the car and opened her door, holding his hand out to help her. She hesitated for a moment, then took it, his hand warm and steady. As they walked toward the entrance, her limp was worse than ever, but she didn't try to hide it now. The nurse at the desk greeted them politely, and Mr. Harris spoke quietly to her, explaining the situation. Emma stood beside him, feeling small and overwhelmed, wondering why he was being so kind to her. No one had ever gone this far for her before. The nurse led them to a small room where a doctor examined her ankle. Gently touching the swollen area, Emma winced softly. The doctor frowned and said it was a bad sprain and that she needed rest and proper treatment. He wrapped her ankle again and told her to stay off her feet for at least 2 weeks. Emma's eyes filled with worry as she looked at Mr. Harris, whispering, 2 weeks, sir, I can't. I'll lose my job." But he shook his head and said, "No, you won't. I'll make sure of it. You'll take your time, get better, and your job will still be waiting for you." She stared at him silently, unable to believe his words, her throat tightening as she tried to speak. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. He looked at her for a moment and then said softly, "Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself. I once had to hide my pain too. I know how it feels to be afraid of losing everything, But no job is worth your health, no strength is real if it breaks you inside. His words hit her heart like a warm wave. Making her eyes fill again, she turned her head slightly so he wouldn't see her tears, but he noticed anyway. After the doctor finished and gave her some medicine, Mr. Harris thanked him and led Emma outside, helping her into the car again. She leaned back against the seat, her leg resting carefully, the pain slowly fading as she looked out the window. This time she didn't feel scared. She felt something new, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, a sense that maybe everything would be okay. For once in her life, someone had seen her pain and cared enough to help without asking anything in return. On the way back, Mr. Harris stopped by a small bakery and came back with a bag of warm bread and tea, handing it to her with a gentle smile. "Eat something. You've been running on empty for too long," he said. She took the bag with shaking hands, whispering a quiet thank you. They drove in silence for a while. The only sound was the hum of the car and the rain beginning to fall softly again. Emma thought about her mother, about how she would tell her what happened, and her heart filled with both gratitude and disbelief. Instead of dropping her at home, Mr. Harris drove to a pharmacy, bought the medicine the doctor had prescribed and handed it to her. Then he said something that made her eyes widen again. "I've also arranged for some help for your mother. The company has a medical assistance program that few people know about. I've added your mother's name to it. She'll get her medicine covered from now on." Emma's hands flew to her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but her voice broke completely. All she could whisper was, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." Over and over, he smiled quietly and said, "You deserve it, Emma. You've given so much without asking for anything. Now it's time someone gives back to you." She looked at him through her tears, her heart overwhelmed with emotion. She wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. The car stopped in front of her house. He got out and helped her to the door, making sure she could walk safely. Before leaving, he said softly, "Rest and don't worry about work. I'll handle everything." She nodded slowly, still crying, as he turned and walked back to his car. As she watched him drive away, the rain began to fall harder, and she stood there in the doorway holding the medicine close to her heart, her tears mixing with the raindrops. For the first time in a long time, she felt that life was giving her a small piece of kindness back. She whispered quietly into the gray air, "Thank you," her voice soft but full of warmth, not knowing that this kindness would soon bring even bigger changes than she could ever imagine. 2 weeks passed like a slow healing song, each day filled with quiet rest and soft hope. Emma spent most of her time sitting by the small window of her home, the sunlight warming her face as she watched people walking outside, her ankle wrapped neatly with fresh bandages, the pain finally fading little by little. Her mother's health had begun to improve too, the new medicines arriving on time every week. She still couldn't believe it was real, that someone had cared enough to make it all happen without asking for anything in return. Every morning she thought about the cafe, about the sound of coffee cups clinking and laughter echoing in the air, about the smell of freshly baked bread and warm smiles of familiar faces. She missed it deeply, but she also knew that for once she had needed this break. Her mother would often remind her to rest and not rush back too soon, saying gently that sometimes even the strongest hearts deserve to breathe. And Emma would smile softly, knowing her mother was right. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris continued to check in quietly without making it obvious. He would call the cafe manager every few days to ask if everything was fine, and whether Emma had all the help she needed. He never told anyone about his visit to the hospital or the money he spent. He didn't do it for praise. He did it because something in Emma's courage had touched something inside him that had been quiet for years. He saw in her the same fire his mother once had, the fire of someone who fights without complaining, who gives everything just to keep going, and he respected that deeply. On the 15th day, Emma received a message from him asking if she felt ready to return to work. Her heart leaped at the sight of his name on the screen. She smiled and typed back that she was better and would love to come back the next morning. He replied simply, "Good. See you at 9. But behind that short message, he was already preparing something that would surprise her completely. The next morning, Emma woke early, her ankle still slightly stiff but strong enough to carry her weight. She put on her uniform neatly, the familiar apron tied around her waist. She looked at herself in the small mirror and smiled, whispering quietly that she was ready. Her mother hugged her tightly before she left, telling her to be careful. And as Emma stepped out into the fresh air, she felt lighter than she had in months. the pain replaced by quiet pride when she entered the cafe. Her co-workers cheered softly, welcoming her back with smiles and hugs. She laughed for the first time in a long while, her eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. She thanked everyone and began helping again. Though they told her to sit, she couldn't help it. The cafe was like home. But as she turned toward the counter, she froze. Mr. Harris was standing there waiting, a calm smile on his face, dressed simply but with that same quiet confidence that made everyone step aside respectfully. "Welcome back, Emma," he said warmly, and she bowed her head shyly, whispering, "Thank you, sir, for everything." He nodded and said softly, "You earned your rest. Now I have something for you." He motioned toward the office and asked her to follow. Her heart raced again, unsure what he meant. Inside the office, the desk looked different, papers neatly arranged, and a small nameplate sitting on the side. She walked closer and gasped quietly when she saw what it said. Emma Brooks, Assistant Manager. She turned toward him in disbelief, her eyes wide, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Sir, I don't understand." He smiled gently and said, "You've shown more strength and loyalty than anyone I've ever worked with. You didn't just keep this cafe running, you carried its heart. You deserve this." Tears filled her eyes again as she shook her head slowly. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, and he replied softly, "Just say you'll keep being the same person you've always been. Honest, brave, and kind." She nodded through her tears, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. The rest of the day felt like a dream. Customers smiled seeing her back. Her co-workers treated her with new respect, and the cafe seemed brighter than ever. She moved carefully but confidently, guiding the team, checking orders and laughing softly between tasks. Mr. Harris watched her from the corner for a while, seeing how natural she looked in her new role, how her presence lifted everyone's spirits, and he knew he had made the right decision. Later that evening, when the cafe was closing, Emma stood by the window watching the sunset paint the sky with gold and pink. Mr. Harris came to stand beside her quietly, both of them looking out at the fading light. He said softly, "You know, life has a strange way of testing us before showing us its kindness." She nodded slowly, her voice gentle as she replied, "Maybe pain is what teaches us to see the good things clearly." He smiled and said, "Exactly, and you've taught me that lesson again." She turned toward him with a shy smile, her eyes glowing with gratitude. When she walked home that evening, the streets glowed under the soft streetlights, the air cool and calm. She carried a small envelope in her hand that he had given her before she left. Inside was a note that said, "For your mother's medicine and for your courage," along with a small bonus she never expected. Her hands shook as she read it, tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of joy, not pain. She looked up at the stars, whispering softly, "Thank you, God. Thank you for sending kindness when I needed it most." Her voice trembling with emotion. At home, her mother hugged her tightly when she heard the news, both of them crying softly in each other's arms. That night, Emma sat by the window once more, her heart calm and full, the city lights twinkling below like promises waiting to be kept. She realized that sometimes the people who change our lives are the ones we least expect, and that strength isn't just about fighting alone. It's also about accepting help when it finds us. She smiled to herself, whispering gently into the night, "Maybe kindness really does come back." And with that soft thought, she finally allowed herself to rest, knowing her story had only just begun.